everyone. Welcome back to the California Ocean Science Trust 2026 Sea Change Scholars webinar series called the Navigating Your Future: Careers at the Ocean and Coastal Science Policy Nexus. As you've seen me before, my name is Heidi Waite. I am a science officer with the Ocean Science Trust, whose mission really is to strengthen the connection between scientific research and sound ocean management. And as you've heard before, part of meeting this mission includes investments to support graduate education and ultimately California science capacity. So this webinar series really gives students, especially grad students, a chance to get a window into the real world ocean and coast related careers at that science policy nexus. Be sure to check out our website to download any of the companion journals that help you reflect on what you've learned from these webinars, as well as finding any of the recordings from previous discussions and a quick 30-minute overview of the California state entities in California. That first webinar gave a really good landscape overall kind of overview of the state entities. We're going to continue featuring staff to discuss their careers and the roles that they play at that state science policy and management landscape. And today we will have staff from the California Water Boards, which we're really excited to have. Before I get into that, I just wanted to take a moment to quickly flag that there is a 3 or 4 question survey that will pop up once you close your Zoom, whether you leave early or stay till the end. Just if you could take a moment to fill that out, we'd really love to hear from you and get your feedback. It'll help us improve the webinar series, and appreciate those who have already filled that out in previous webinars as well. Okay, great. So today, as I mentioned, we have staff from the California Water Boards. I'm going to briefly, give the overview of their mission, but we'll have the panelists themselves to give a little extra context and kind of the structure of the water boards. The water board mission really is to preserve, enhance, and restore the quality of California's water resources and drinking water for the protection of environment, public health, and all beneficial uses, and to preserve proper water resource allocation and efficient use for the benefit of future and present generations. Like I said, the panelists today are going to give us insights into their roles and career pathways. We're going to start, as always, with a little bit of introduction from the panelists of their role and their position, and then we have a couple prepared questions that have come through either the registration or from previous webinars that we want to pull through into today's webinar, but also encourage you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask any questions you have at any point during this discussion. We really would love to hear from you and be able to answer any questions you have. All right. With that, I'm really excited to start to bring in some of the panelists one at a time to turn their cameras on and join. So I will start with Keara. You're up first, and I welcome you to turn on your camera, do a brief introduction, name, pronouns, job title, and also give us a little glimpse into the structure, what are the water boards exactly, and what kind of divisions you have, etc. So I'll pass it off to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keara Tuso. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently an environmental scientist at the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, also known as the Central Water Board. I'm here to provide also a little bit of background about the water boards as a whole. So the State Water Resource Control Board was developed by the California legislature in 1967 to really serve as a regulatory arm of the executive branch to protect water quality, water rights, and a number of different beneficial uses. The water board itself, they're essentially a board of 5 panelists that are, let's say, they're chosen, appointed by the governor to help make decisions. And then there are a number of respective divisions and agencies that bring forth regulations, enforcement, implementation plans, and all different kinds of documents. The State Water Resource Control Board, or State Water Board, is located in Sacramento at the California EPA building. That is the headquarters of the water boards. There are also 9 regional boards across the state that focus more on local regulation, implementation, monitoring, and enforcement, whereas the State Water Board is sort of this overreaching kind of body to help develop regulations, policies, and plans. Now, there are a lot of people at the water boards. It's not just scientists. We have scientists, engineers, geologists, researchers, analysts, and technicians. So there are a lot of different pathways one could go down if you are looking into the water boards.
Amazing. Thank you. That's really helpful to hear kind of how things are broken down in the water boards and about the different regional levels as well. Great. So I will next bring up Hannah to give a quick introduction, name, pronouns, current title, maybe a brief sentence or so of your position.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. Thanks for having me. My name is Hannah Kempf. I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently an environmental scientist at the State Water Board, and I work in our Ocean Standards Unit.
Amazing. Great. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty about what kind of projects you're working on in a moment. But first, I'd like to bring up our last panelist here, Beverly, to also give an introduction. Same prompt.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here today, and thanks for having me. I'm Beverly Scharnhorst. I also work in the same unit as Hannah at the State Water Board in the Ocean Standards Unit as an environmental scientist. Great to meet everyone.
Amazing. Well, I'm hoping we can dig into a little bit more about what it means to be an environmental scientist with the water boards and what kind of projects you're working on and the kinds of daily tasks that you have as an environmental scientist. So maybe I can start back with Keara and then work our way back again.
Great, thank you. So, an environmental scientist is essentially a staff level scientist that will use data, policy, and active research to develop plans, policies, and regulations to protect water quality in the state. As an environmental scientist at the Central Coast Water Board located in San Luis Obispo, I work mainly on surface water quality assessments, so looking at all the different water bodies in the region and determining how they are impaired due to different types of pollutants and how much of those pollutants are in the water body. So we work on these active plans called total maximum daily loads, which essentially identify pollutants that are impairing specific water bodies and what we can do to address that. I had previously worked on more of the oceans work that Hannah and Beverly will discuss.
Great. Yes, definitely. Maybe Hannah jump in next. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I thank you, Keara, for giving a good overview of all the things that the water boards work on. It's a huge organization and we work on a lot of different issues. So it's nice to have that context. But in my current role, I work primarily on standards development for surface water quality in the ocean. So I am interested in nutrients. That's kind of like the largest topic area that I'm focused on right now. So as a regulatory agency, we're really tasked with protecting water quality from different pollutants and anthropogenic impacts. So right now, my primary project is focused on sort of like policy standards development at the regulatory level to address impacts from anthropogenic nutrients, largely from wastewater treatment plants. So I'm basically interested in trying to figure out ways to protect coastal water quality from eutrophication that's caused by a lot of nutrients in waters and the sort of subsequent issues associated with eutrophication, like subsurface loss of oxygen and acidification, harmful algal blooms. These are all topics that I'm interested in. So that's sort of my primary focus area. But on a day-to-day basis, it's a mix of things. I read scientific papers and, summarize them for folks who don't have the time or it's not in their job description to read the scientific papers, but are expected to sort of have a basic understanding of them. I work a lot with the regulated community, so working with wastewater agencies and talking about ways to maybe improve facilities so that, we can protect coastal water quality. So yeah, that's just a little overview of some of the things that I work on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Thank you. And Beverly.
Yeah, so I'm in the same unit as Hannah, and so we kind of have like two separate focus areas in our unit. So some of the projects that I work on is the California Coastal Beach Monitoring Program, which is a statewide program where we work with the coastal counties in California for doing beach water quality testing to ensure that it is safe for people to swim. And so a lot of that work comes with ensuring that the data that the agencies are submitting meet the stringent data quality requirements that are set up by both the California EPA and the California Department of Public Health. And then as part of the water boards, we help manage a lot of the funding that the local agencies need in order to do the testing. So a lot of the work for the beach monitoring program that I do is the grant and contract management, the data management, and then just working with the regulatory agencies on the bacteriological standards for safe to swim contact. The other project that I work on is state water quality protection areas. The more common known one is areas of special biological significance, and those are areas along the California coast that are prohibited against waste discharges. And a lot of that work essentially revolves around how these areas were set up and how they function from a regulatory standpoint, looking at how the ASBS areas have functioned over time, and then the different permit and discharge exception structure that is set up for these areas, and then looking at potential nominations for future designations. And then in addition to that, we work on like small grants as well. Like for example, a recent one was the DDT research grant that Sea Grant worked on, where we helped provide funding to look at DDT contamination in the Southern California Bight. And then there's a few other projects that our unit works on as well, such as the once through cooling policy is another big one. And then I'm sure there are a few other ones as well. Hannah, I'm not sure if I'm missing any, but those are kind of like the main ones that we work on in the Ocean Standards unit.
Thank you. That's helpful to hear the kinds of projects and the kinds of work you all are each doing and across the different divisions. Knowing that you all are sort of environmental scientists now at water boards, I'm first curious if water boards were on your radar when you were looking towards a career, and then kind of what was that career pathway to this current position and how long you've been in this position. So maybe there's a couple questions I'm happy to remind you of those as I pass it off. Do we want to keep the same order, maybe just for the purposes of just ease? So I'll start with Keara again. And let me know if you want me to repeat some of those within there.
Great, thank you. So at the Central Coast Board, I've been here for about a year, but prior to being in San Luis Obispo, I was an environmental scientist at the State Water Board for about 5 years, working in both the Assessment Policy and Process Unit, which is really a surface water quality assessment team, and also the Ocean Standards Unit, like Hannah and Beverly, working on ocean acidification issues. So I didn't necessarily know that I was going to end up at the water board. I had received my undergrad degree in environmental science from UCLA and really was interested in environmental education and teaching and sort of the nonprofit pathway. I did that for several years and went back to get my master's in environmental policy and management from UC Davis, where I really became inspired to pursue environmental policy, but I wasn't really sure what that looked like or really what that even would be in the context of a career. And so after I finished my master's, I worked as an environmental lobbyist for a time, kind of thinking about the application of policy on the ground level. So working on plastic bag bans or talking about shellfish regulations or these kind of different pieces of ocean work. And while this was exciting, I found it a bit overwhelming, and maybe that wasn't the right personality fit for me. And so I really looked towards more of that regulatory work, and the Sea Grant Fellowship kind of presented an opportunity to get into being a part of the regulatory world. I had met a number of people with the water boards, and so it was an agency that was of interest to me, among others. And after completing a fellowship as a Sea Grant Fellow with the Ocean Standards Unit at the State Water Board, I really enjoyed the work and found it to be really valuable. And so here I am 6 years later, still working for the water boards, but it's been a really, really enjoyable process and definitely has had many different, data challenges and logistical challenges of understanding all these different facets of what goes into water quality. So definitely a progressive process, but happy where I am and I really enjoy being here.
Amazing. Thank you. I'd love to hear your thoughts now, Hannah, also on that.
Yeah, happy to. So, I have been at the State Water Board in my current position since January of 2025. So that's what, a year and some change. And prior to that, I, like Keara and Beverly, actually was also a California Sea Grant State Fellow. I was a state fellow at a different agency. I was with the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, working in the Bay on issues related to tidal wetland restoration. And that experience was really wonderful. It was a great sort of stepping stone into my current position. That being said, the agency was quite different. It was a non-regulatory agency that, worked a lot with regulators, but sort of functioned a little bit differently than, say, the water boards do. But in that position, like I said, I worked a lot with people from the State Water Board and saw that they were really some of the folks who, as Keara mentioned in her introduction, like these are the folks who are really like developing regulatory policy that then gets implemented on these more local scales. And that was something that I found interesting and something that was new for me. Because I had been in academia before that and doing really, technical research, but not really working on the policy side of things. So anywho, basically I started applying for jobs with regulatory agencies and saw this position with with the California Water Board. And, it tied into issues that I was really passionate about, like ocean acidification. And it just worked out. And I've been here for a year and a half and it's been a ride. It's good. But yeah, I think that answered most of the questions. But yeah, prior to that, like I said, I was in academia. I did a PhD at UC Davis. Like also very different from what I'm currently doing, but happy to chat about it more as this webinar goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the differences of working in these different kind of sectors, but we can get into that in a little bit later in the webinar. I'd love to give Beverly you a chance to also give us your pathway to your position now. And we're having some questions come through the chat, so thank you all for doing that. So please continue to do that. We're going to try to pepper them in along the way in this discussion. Beverly.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. So I've been in my current role for about a year. I started April of 2025, and then before that, I was a Sea Grant Fellow in for 2024, and I was actually in the current unit that I'm in now. So I've been with the Water Board now either through my current capacity or as a Sea Grant Fellow for almost 2 years or a little over 2 years. Before that, I did my graduate degree at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in Marine Biodiversity and Conservation. And that was the program where I had heard about the Sea Grant Fellowship and then therefore heard about the State Water Board. So I actually did not know too much about the Water Board until I started applying for the Sea Grant Fellowship. But I was really excited about it because I think marine resource management and environmental policy were kind of like the two areas that I really wanted to grow in for my career, and the Sea Grant Fellowship offered a good opportunity for that. And then the State Water Board just has so many different great projects and areas that they focus on that I thought this would be a great fit, and happy to be here today with the Water Board as well.
Amazing. And you all mentioned being Sea Grant Fellows. So I wonder if we can go into that a little bit more in detail to get us maybe it sounds like you can give us a little bit overview of what that fellowship is, what kind of benefits there are. And I think you've already started touching on these, but give us a sense of how it shaped your professional network or open, what kind of doors they open. It does seem like you all kind of landed in another agency, either in a similar one or one or already in the same agency. So curious to hear what you think the benefit of this grant is or this fellowship is, and what and maybe a little bit about the application process, what it looks like. So I will leave it open to see who wants to start on that one. So
I
I
can.
can go.
Oh, Beverly, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I really do think that the fellowship is a really great opportunity to kind of get your foot in the door to working with different state agencies and learning about how they function together, how they collaborate, and then how they really kind of take the science and turn that into policy and overall effective management. So I do really think it's a great opportunity to kind of really get that professional experience in environmental policy. Uh, and then the application process is I'm trying to remember. It's been so long now. But the application process is usually like a personal statement, getting references, having your transcripts and your resume, and then you go through this whole matching workshop process, which is really great because then you can get paired with an agency that you really want to be with or that you feel like would be really great for your career overall. And yeah, I'll stop there and let some of the other panelists speak on it as well.
So I'll just provide a little bit more context about what the Sea Grant Fellowship is. It's an ocean science policy fellowship that you can do after you complete a graduate degree, whether that's a master's or a PhD or something like those. You apply for this fellowship and you get placed into a state agency for 1 year to work on, ideally, ocean science and policy, but in many different capacities. And so there are usually between 20 to 30 different state agencies that will look for fellows. And even within their one agency, there may be multiple fellows. So right now, there are several fellows at the State Water Board in Sacramento, and at the Central Coast Water Board, we also have a fellow too. So there are a number of different opportunities, even within a single agency. And it's just a really great opportunity to not only get your foot in the door for an agency, but to meet people and to understand what it means to work for a state agency and whether or not you like being a part of a regulatory or non-regulatory process. Can you handle, the speed of bureaucratic process? Maybe you want something that's faster. Maybe you want something where you're more hands-on or less hands-on. So it's really just an opportunity to learn and provide great information to you.
amazing. Um, Kind of along those questions, you all mentioned that, and something that I've noticed, we've had several Sea Grant fellows at the Ocean Science Trust as well. And it seems to just help you build that network. And we did have a question in the chat that I'm just going to elevate here about what are good places to look for networking. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that or advice to provide on networking there. Would love to hear.
I think the fact that these folks are in a webinar like this today is a great start. I think that you just need to be brave sometimes. And I would like email people. I would, find them on LinkedIn and just be like, hi, I'm Hannah. I'm interested in this kind of career. This is my background. Would you be interested in a 30-minute chat just so I can learn more about what you work on? And, I had probably 5 to 10 conversations with folks like that I met briefly, and just spent some time sort of gathering information to see what types of options are out there. And yeah, obviously, it can be uncomfortable to sort of put yourself out there, but I think it's worth it. And people remember you so much more if you make a like face-to-face connection or, a Zoom to Zoom connection. So yeah, that would be sort of my advice is just, don't be afraid to reach out to people that you meet in things like webinars or if you're at a conference or something like that.
I would definitely echo that. And as you've seen through this webinar series, a lot of the panelists are more than welcome to chat with you. So don't be afraid to reach out to them and confirm with the panelists today to share out their information, their emails, but would encourage you all to look at previous panelists too. And if there's anyone that interests you, definitely reach out to them. Anyone else want to add on to that before I move on to another question we have actually that's come through the chat related to the CCST fellowship? Okay. I'm just going to read May's question here out to you all. I'm wrapping up my PhD soon and wanting to break from academia to explore fellowships like the CCST or the Sea Grant Fellowship. I might still want to pursue an academic postdoc afterwards. Would it be difficult to get hired into a position at an agency like the ones you are in, water boards, after a postdoc, or is that okay? Are there fellowships really, or do the fellowships really are desired for folks that to go into a permanent agency position afterwards?
I can take a crack at this one. Okay, so there's a few questions in here. Would it be difficult to get hired in a position like the ones we're in now after a postdoc? I will just say, based off of the folks I work with, there are very few folks who have done a PhD and then have also done a postdoc that's not something like a Sea Grant postdoc or a AAAS or a Knaus or something along those lines. Usually their postdoc or their, fellowship after they graduate is more focused on sort of the policy science interface. That being said, I don't think it's probably impossible. But, I think, let's see, the fellowships, like the Sea Grant fellowships, I think are mostly designed as sort of a stepping stone position from academia to policy or management or, whatever sort of more applied scientific relevant work. So that being said, I don't want to tell this person, that it's impossible to have a non-traditional trajectory. It's very likely that that is possible, but based off the people that I know, that's not really common to have beyond a PhD or a master's level of sort of like technical research experience.
Great. And for a question, another question that was in the chat, just to clarify, the California Sea Grant Fellowship is for those that have masters, PhDs, or JDs, I believe, correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
I can also provide a little bit from what Hannah was saying that I do think that the Sea Grant Fellowship, it's not saying that you have to go into state work afterwards. Certainly, people do the fellowship and then return to academia or go into the private sector or nonprofit. I think it's just an opportunity to understand kind of what state work is like. And I do know some people who have completed PhDs and postdocs and then come into state work. Some find it challenging because it's a very different type of process. And so it's just you have to be comfortable with the idea of really switching gears. And I'm sure Hannah can speak to that more. I'll say my current spouse completed a PhD and did some postdoc research and is now he's now works for a state agency. And so it is definitely possible, but it is not the straightest route, I would say, if you're going for Sea Grant first.
Got it. And I don't know if you would know your partner's experience, but there is a question about transitioning from that postdoc to back to agency work. Do you have any thoughts, any of the panelists, on how to do that or what kind of skills or how to market yourself a little bit better for agencies when coming back from academic world to the agencies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what is really helpful is to sort of highlight your soft skills and your transferable skills. So rather than going into like the nitty gritty of what you did for your thesis or your postdoc or your publications, unless it's really relevant to the specific job, focus more on your ability to, translate scientific information to non-specialists or your ability to code if that's relevant to the position that you're working in or applying for, or your ability to use tools like GIS. And Yeah, sort of focus more on like large scale. Like, here's why I'm a good candidate. It's because I know how to learn. It's because I know how to communicate. I know how to think critically. I know how to write. I have experience in sort of these larger scale things that are still very relevant to the position, rather than like hyper focusing on your very niche research topic. Because yeah, often folks are more interested in sort of like the soft and transferable skills. That's my view at least.
I definitely think the communication bit of that, being able to communicate and bring your work more broadly, the larger picture is really important for folks that are not, in a PhD program or directly in academia. So I appreciate that comment as well, and just generally transferable skills, the soft skills, a lot of how do you work with people, management skills, which you do gain through potentially a PhD if you're managing other undergrads or other PhD researchers. So you do have a lot more skills than you think a lot of times from when you transition out of grad school. So something to kind of brainstorm and reflect on as you go through. But I see Beverly, you unmuted, so I'll pass it to you.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna really echo what Hannah said about like your transferable and soft skills. Like a lot of the agencies really look for like how well can you handle projects? Can you communicate with people effectively? Can you be adaptable and flexible? Can you like help tackle challenges from many different viewpoints? So I think that's a lot of or something that's really important when going into the environmental science and management space is just having those soft skills. So yeah, just wanted to echo what Hannah said.
Amazing. Awesome. And I want to go into eventually into these career transitions and some of the skills building there, but we had a question at the start that I want to make sure that we don't forget. And it's always kind of fun to hear about what you enjoy most about working at the water boards and maybe what has surprised you the most about working there, especially given sort of all these varied backgrounds that you all have. I'm excited to hear what you all might think. Maybe I can start with Kira.
Yeah, so I love this question. I think that what I enjoy the most is getting to see the work that you do actually come into fruition. So you may spend years working on a specific task. Like I had worked on developing these numeric thresholds for ocean acidification, and it takes a long time to do anything really. And then it's in a plan and it's in a policy, and suddenly everyone in the state is now monitoring for this specific thing, or they're reporting on all these different issues. And so getting to see your work become a reality is really exciting. And it's not something that I always found was the case when you'd work maybe in academia or private sector. What you work on doesn't always come into action. And so being able to see the results of your hard work is just really inspiring, and it makes everyone really excited to do more. And so, yeah, that's the biggest thing is impacting change.
Amazing. Do either other panelists want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I really like what Kira said, and I think that is a big piece of it overall. So, for example, like something that I really love about my job is for the Coastal Beach Monitoring Project. It's a statewide project that affects a lot of people. Like people love to go to the beach and they want to make sure that the water that they're going into is safe. And since the water board provides this funding for the agencies to do the monitoring, because the state water board collects all of the water quality data that these agencies are collecting, so that so that it can be available for public use. Is just really cool to see overall. So I like that I get to be a part of that program. And then there's just so many different projects that we work on as a whole. It's fun that each day is different, which is great. And you get to work with a lot of different other agencies like the Ocean Protection Council, the State Lands Commission, the California Air Resources Board. Like there's so many different agencies that we get to collaborate because water touches a lot of different areas. So it's yeah, it's very fun.
It's great to hear. Yes, I think that is one of the really cool parts about working on an agency and outside of academia. Although you can find those ways to do in academia, but you're a little bit more steeped in it in as an agency. Um, Great. So I would love to talk a little bit about career transitions. It sounds like you all have had different journeys to get where you're at, and some more interesting or different kinds of backgrounds than someone who's, has a more very easy trajectory. So I would love to dig into that a little bit more and to hear what kind of skills, any advice you have, or what kind of experiences maybe set you up for your positions now. Give us a little brief background of like what are some of the biggest transitions? I know Beverly, you had some background in maybe business supply chain kind of management and then switched into the environmental marine science. And I think you mentioned you had a master's, and we do have a question also about tips onto master's programs. So if you have any to give on that as well, would love to hear. So I'll start with Beverly, and then as others want to contribute to that question, would love to hear.
Great. Yeah. I'll try to see if I can remember the questions that you asked.
I can remind you, no worries.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I actually, before I started working in the marine science space, my undergrad is in business administration and global supply chain management, and I actually started my career in the aerospace field. So I was working at a company called Raytheon Technologies, and then while I was working in that space, I really started to get more interested in marine conservation work. So I started working on different sustainability projects at that company to try to get some more experience and see how I can overall transition into the space. And then from there, I was like, okay, how can I make the full career transition? And there was a master's program at Scripps, and their overall goal was to really take what multidisciplinary skills and backgrounds that you have, and how can we translate that into how can you help make an impact in marine conservation. So they specifically took people who didn't have a science background, and they wanted you to take the skills that you have and apply that forward. So what I had done was my skills that I had gained in data analysis or resource management. How can I take that and put it forward to marine conservation? So then for my capstone project, for example, I did data and economic analysis to look at wetland services along in San Diego County. So I was trying to show, here's how I can take my prior background and apply it forward in the marine conservation space. But yeah, I don't know if that answered all the questions. I think that was the first question, but I know there was a second part to that.
There's a question in the chat from Ethan about tips on getting into master's programs. So can open that up to you, and then we can also open up to the other folks too.
Oh yeah.
If you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So when going into the master's program, I think something that had helped was showing that continued interest that you've had throughout your life to kind of help out with marine conservation, and just skills that you've developed over time that could be utilized for a master's degree. I think one of the things that Scripps really focused on was how have you shown over time that you really want to be a part of marine science? How do you want to make change? And what would you work on potentially in the future if you were to be in the program? But yeah, I think that was kind of like one of the main things that they had looked at.
Great. No, that's helpful to hear. And maybe I will pass it to Keara because I'm curious if you want to reflect on any of your career transitions and the kinds of advice and skills you have there. But I'm also curious, since you worked in kind of a couple different sectors, nonprofit, private, public, you'll have to remind me exactly which ones. I'm also curious to hear what those transitions were like and what surprised you the most about those.
Yeah. So I've gotten a taste, I guess, of all the different sectors, working in nonprofit as an environmental educator, then working as a lobbyist, which is really more of a private sector job. However, I was representing the interests of a lot of nonprofits, and so I got to be sort of at that nexus of private and nonprofit, and then being a part of a public agency. Um, I think some of the transitions lent themselves to be smoother than others. I think moving from working on policy at the legislature to working for a regulatory agency was a fairly smooth transition, mostly because I already spoke this sort of policy language. So it was not extremely necessarily difficult to change focus. But moving from nonprofit to private is a change. I mean, certainly you get paid much differently, which is a benefit, I would say. But you also change kind of how you're feeling about your work. Are you representing, the local people, or are you representing an organization? And so really being able to identify what is important to you should really guide whether you want to be in nonprofit, public, academia, and you want to be in the private sector. Where do you want to feel like you can be the biggest benefit? Or maybe you want to grow your career skills through the private industry first. And so it's really just a matter of kind of understanding what is important to yourself and your career trajectory. As far as like getting into a master's program, I just want to say that what can be really helpful too is understanding whether or not you're interested in pursuing research or if you're looking for more of a professional master's. So myself and Beverly completed more professional master's degrees, and so these ones have the end goal of transitioning you into a position with the government or with the private sector in that specific field. So if someone is interested in a professional degree in the environmental science field or marine science, I would look at programs through Scripps, through UC Santa Barbara's Bren School, through UC Davis's John Muir Institute. Those are kind of the three big ones as far as professional masters go, but there are many that exist across the state. And so if you are pursuing professional, just reach out to the programs. If you are looking into research, I really encourage you to reach out to different professors and advisors.
That's a great point between the different kinds of master's programs, and you approach them very differently. And I have more experience on the research side of things, and those require sort of understanding a lab, looking for lab specific and looking to see if there's funding from that, or not from from certain labs, and developing a relationship ahead of time with the advisor there. So definitely two different approaches. So I appreciate that. And Hannah, I don't know if you have anything to add to the conversation in general about the master's programs, but also about career transitions from that PhD, especially into this more management role. I'd also would love to hear more on your experiences there.
Sure. I guess when it comes to applying for master's degrees, I, like you, Heidi, have more of an experience in like the research focus. I did a research focused master's. I guess the only thing I would add, and thanks, Keara, for also adding the distinction between the different types of masters, is to start looking early. Because oftentimes professors, they're confident that they won't have funding, or maybe they have a pot of money to fund you. I'm thinking for the research masters, but yeah, start really early as much as you can. Try to go to things like conferences, things like webinars, and reach out, expressing your interests, and do so professionally, and don't write them an AI email, because I think a lot of folks think that's rude. Make it personal. And yeah, that's the only thing I would add. And then as far as career transition, I would say that the transition from graduate school to this position, graduate school / my 1-year fellowship, it took a little bit of time for me to get used to the difference and sort of pace at which things get done. And I would say that's been like challenging, if I'm honest with you, because at least in the regulatory world, there are so many levels at which you have to get things approved in order to move projects forward. So like for me, when I did my PhD, it's like getting your dissertation approved, not only by your supervisor and then your committee, and then whoever the final checkoff is. It's like you have to get your PhD approved by like your peers, and then your supervisor, and then your committee, and then like assistant to the assistant of the dean, and then assistant dean, and then the dean, and then the president. So like that, it's just a very different sort of pace at which you have the ability to move things forward, which can be challenging, and just something to sort of be aware of before you start.
That is super helpful to hear, and something that we might not think about as folks outside of that agency, or when you're making that transition as a something that works differently. Different sectors work differently. So I appreciate that and appreciate the vulnerability of sharing something that is challenging because every job has different challenges and different sectors have different challenges. Um, I want to make sure we have one more question in the Q&A as of right now, and I want to make sure we get to that the first part of that. I've asked a little bit the second question about networking, but the first question um, was how should someone stay motivated while the federal funding is being cut and environmental science just generally is kind of being looked down at, or that whole kind of dynamic that's occurring? What are the things that you do personally or as an organization to, I don't know, build up your motivations, and give yourself a little pep talk, I guess, sometimes. Maybe I'll start with well, I'll actually leave it open because this one we don't necessarily need to have everyone answer if you don't want to.
So I'll start just so I work on surface water quality assessments, also known as the Integrated Report, which is a Clean Water Act designated project. I mean, it's approved by the US EPA, and the development of total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, are also approved by US EPA. So my main two focuses are heavily involved with the federal government. It is challenging, I think, because everything is moves a lot slower and there's a lot of uncertainty about whether or not our projects will cross the finish line. But what I try to remember too is that EPA are full of scientists just like us who really want to see the betterment of our environment, and they really have the same goals and desires to improve water quality. And so you're really still working together. It's just going to be a bit of a slower process, but it's still possible and it certainly is still happening. And so we still get projects approved by EPA every day. It happens. It's just the timeline has extended, but it's still possible. I think that being a part of a state agency and having a union represent you in the state of California is really great as well. And so there's a level of safety that you feel working for the state that you may not necessarily feel if you're working for a federal agency. And so that is also a big piece of it, and maybe an incentive for people who are looking for job transitions after grad school, that at this time you may feel more comfortable working for a California agency. So that I think is also a piece of it. And then just remembering all of the people that you get to work with. Something that's really special about working at the water boards is that everyone wants to do better and see better and is motivated to improve California. And that's just kind of a really beautiful feeling to have and to take with you. And if you can hold on to that, you can sort of see yourself through these projects. So change can still happen. It's just might be a little bit more incremental, and you have to sort of accept that and roll with the tide changes.
Yeah, I think Kira put it beautifully. I love it. And then I'll just kind of add to just to say that something that helps to motivate me is seeing all of the other agencies, whether it's state or nonprofit or even for-profit agencies that are trying to make a difference in the marine conservation or just overall conservation space to help protect the environment and promote um, like helping out with problems and issues related to climate change. Is just really great to see like all of these other organizations come together to still try to make a difference. So that's always really great to see, and something that I like to do. And then just from a like a small project that I work on perspective is for the beach monitoring program. It's not only a California project, but it's also it's throughout the entire US. So like every month we have meetings with all the different states that are along the coast, whether it's Florida, Texas, I think, oh, who else is in there? Yeah, Florida, Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina. There's a lot of different states who are also a part of this program as well. And we meet each month and we talk about the things that we're working on. So a lot of the different states like still come and work together. And then there's a lot of different other organizations that help try to make a difference as well. So that's what I kind of do to help stay motivated.
Thank you. I appreciate those reflections. Definitely something I think about a lot, and I And we're lucky that in California we are leading in a lot of environmental efforts and have a little bit of a safe haven in the current context of happenings in our country. So thank you for those reflections. I have one more question around the role of science in your positions, and then we'll have a closing question that's a little bit more forward-looking on the kinds of things and skills that you all are cultivating for your own career trajectories. But first, I wanted to ask a little bit more about science and the role in policy and management in your specific works, and you kind of have touched on it throughout our conversation today. But if there's anything else you wanted to add on the role of science in management and policy, and if there are any misconceptions from the outside, especially from folks that aren't working in agencies or in academia, about how science fits into the policy and management process. Maybe Hannah, if you want to take a first stab at this, and then if anyone else wants to add anything, they're welcome to.
Sure. I'm actually going to start with some of the, misconceptions, I think, piece, because I think it's really important to highlight. I have done this, so this is in no way accusatory, but a lot of times I think, especially early career scientists and even later career scientists, when they're publishing something, they try to make it relevant to management by just talking about it in sort of like the broader impact section or the abstract, or the introduction piece. And they'll talk about it in a manuscript and then publish the manuscript, and then they're like, okay, I'm good, it's relevant to management, it's going to get used. But I think why that is a misconception is that a lot of folks working in the management space, it's not necessarily part of their like day-to-day job activities to like go search through the scientific literature. I think what really needs to happen is there really needs to be an active role played by the scientists to reach out and bring forth this information early and often to folks who are at like the staff level, because those are the folks who are really doing the synthesis of scientific work. And then they are the ones communicating it up to like the higher level decision makers. So I think there just needs to be a better bridge between folks doing research and science and people sort of at like the staff level at these regulatory agencies who are sort of like doing the thought process behind like the regulatory policy development. And it needs to be very clear why the research is relevant to a very specific issue that a manager is working on. So yeah, I think I just want to highlight that like there really does need to be an active role from the scientist level in order for their work to actually get used. And as far as, how do scientific findings actually get into policy and management? I think it depends on the project, but in my current role, like I work a lot with different entities composed primarily of research scientists that exist to do science relevant to management. So for example, I work a lot with the SCWRP, Southern California Coastal Water Research Project. I've also worked with the San Francisco Estuary Institute. So these are non-academic institution research entities who, again, are doing research explicitly to be tailored to management issues. That being said, SCWRP, for example, and SFEI, just as a couple of examples, they have done a lot of work connecting with academic scientists. So like sort of through SCWRP and these other groups, I've connected through academics in that way. But yeah, I think it's a long process. And I think one thing that is important to remember is that, especially if you're hoping your science will be used for regulatory purposes, being able to communicate about the uncertainty in your science is really important in a way that is digestible. If you just like throw up a bunch of stats on a page, that's probably not the best idea because it won't necessarily get used. But being able to talk through that uncertainty and where you do have confidence or maybe lack confidence is really an important skill. And yeah, Keara and Beverly have also worked on this stuff too, so feel free to chime in.
I'll just say that something that's really helpful that scientific agencies can do, especially if they're planning to submit any data or information to us, is to please make sure you have really thorough lab methods written out, quality assurance methods. Make sure that we can understand what your data is and what it does, because we want to use it. We always want to use it. The more data, the more information, the better. We just are not always able to use it if it doesn't sort of meet these specific requirements. So if you want your science communicated, definitely make an effort to make it, yeah, as clear and concise as possible, but also provide direct emails and conversations to staff like us. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to use your science. It makes our work better and more accurate. And we want current policy and regulation to have the most up-to-date science possible. So reach out to us whenever you have information or questions.
Great. Yes, I think that is all great points. Reach out to agency folks, have conversations, share your science in a way that is understandable. I think that's something, a skill to build as a scientist is a science communication for different audiences. And there are lots of trainings out there through different organizations like AAAS and AGU, etc. They all have science communication kind of workshops and things. So I would definitely seek those out. It's learning to sort of flip the triangle that we're used to as academics, where we start with all the nitty gritty and then finally get to our takeaways. You kind of have to switch that around a lot of times. And what are the big things, the takeaways, and then can get in the nitty gritty. I know we only have 3 minutes here, so I'm going to make this a lightning round, and maybe you can give it to me in either a sentence or a word of what skill you're building for your own career moving forward, and or something you're excited about in the next year or so in your positions. So I'll start with Beverly, and then but lightning round if possible.
Okay. Communication and collaboration, I think really important skills. I'll leave it at that.
Nice. Thank you. How about Hannah?
I was also going to say communication. I'll say summarizing. Type of
Thank you.
Also collaboration, but data management, always
Okay.
helpful, always improving.
Great. Well, keep those in mind, folks, as you are prepping and if you're interested in agency world, it sounds like these are some important skills to build. Well, I want to wrap us up here for the day. A huge thank you to our panelists for taking the time today to chat with us. We really appreciate it. I know that participants can't clap, but I'll clap for them. We really appreciate you being here. And for those that tuned in, also, we appreciate your attention and all your amazing questions. I believe I got to all of them, so I'm glad that we got the chance to have panelists answer all your questions. Feel free to email any other questions that come out throughout the time, throughout, reflection after this webinar. Just a reminder, you can find that information about the series and any of the accompanying resources and previous recordings of panels on that 2026 Sea Change Scholars webinar series page. Our next webinar is going to be June 4th, 12 to 1 p.m. We're going to continue having these throughout the summer, so don't tune out. Hopefully you can still tune in for some of these. Our next group entity that we'll have is the Delta Stewardship Council, so we hope you'll join to hear a little bit more about that. I see that the panelists are dropping their emails in the chat, so feel free to reach out to them as well. Yeah, I'm excited to have more in June, July, and August, and throughout the fall as well. So make sure to tune in for that. As you go, there will be a quick 3-question survey that should pop up when you close your Zoom. So please take a moment to fill that out. It will really help us improve our webinar series. Really appreciate your time. Thank you again to the panelists. I hope to see you next time. Bye.